I'd like to add something. I think that, there's an opportunity, of course, in using structural funds outside your own region as far as it makes sense for your region. And in fact, we are using that, for example, in the construction of telescopes that are developed by different member states, and they are based on the Canary Islands. So some regions have allocated money for building those telescopes. But I think that's a very special case. For promoting innovation, I see many practical difficulties in trying, in allowing to flow money from one region to another. First of all, because of the financial crisis, so many regions are relying on structural funds to make an innovation policy. Second, because the project must be pre-financed from the region. So you have to put the money in advance, and then you receive the money back once you have certified it. So, of course, it's desirable to have that opportunity and to fund projects that make sense in your region, even though they are developed somewhere else. But I think that it's very difficult for just practical reasons.
Let's take another question. Thank you.
My name is Paolo Barbanti. I'm consultant for startup and life science company. Dr. Svensson, you mentioned before the collaboration among different clusters. One cluster is in Germany, another in the Netherlands, in Italy, and so on. As you know, in every field of research, and thinking to life science and medicine, the big problem is how to transform an idea in a product from the bench to bedside. And it's important today is how to share experience, patents, knowledge, and innovation. Today's strategic role is played by technology transfer to organization, knowledge transfer, or public and private service companies involved at this kind of very strategic point. In Germany, we have a Fraunhofer experience. It's a fantastic, successful story. But my question is, in particular for Vanguard Initiative, what is the policy of your project, in particular for this kind of strategic point, how to transform an idea from the bench to a company? Professor De Souza before explained the role in a typical Italian mature traditional industry, shoemakers. What is the role for tech transfer? Because today I think to biomedical devices. There is a lot of idea for an aerospace industry, new textiles to materials for wings, and winglet they are transferred for Alenia Aerospace to Rizzoli Orthopedics for making new smart prostheses. What is your point of view for this kind? How to transform an idea and transfer to companies, small and medium enterprise in particular?
Thank you.
That was a very good question. I think my answer should be that in the previous time I was manager of a hospital, and so I think I partly understand it. I think that again the society in the regions has a huge opportunity to use their own responsibility organizations as a tool, and as I said before, as a customer. Because if we are moving from buying products as cheap as possible to, for example, we will in Skåne, it's not decided, but we have discussed diabetes. We will, in city of Malmö and in region, we will lower the amount of 10-year young people that have diabetes to this. And we will buy solutions. And that is a thing that we can use as a driver for that. That is interesting for researchers. That's interesting for companies. That is a way to address different actors to the same issue. And I think this is one of the possibilities that our organization, like Health Organization Europe, they are sort of well organized, most of them not very corrupted, and so on. So they are sort of a huge potential customer for this. So my answer should be to use, and that comes back to the politicians, because the politicians are in most cases the owner of the societal challenges. So that, I think that's a huge possibility, not just to share solutions, share your needs. And that is, I think that would be interesting.
I would also suggest companies to support the transfer technology centers of universities. Because I visited Silicon Valley many times, 14 times, when I covered technology from the US. And what I saw at Stanford is really what a Polytechnic of Milan, for example, is implementing now in Italy. So a great transfer technology office with many people working, smart people working, someone finding funds from companies, other taking the best brains of the university at work on this project. And then we could also have our policymakers understand better to elaborate more intelligent laws on transferring technologies, I mean in terms of patents, because we have to understand how much of the patents should go to the university in percentage and how much of the value from the patents should go to the inventor and how much to the company who was sponsor of the research. So we have this kind of best practice in the world. Why don't we just learn the lesson and implement that in our countries? What do you think?
I think it's a very good idea, and I think that, of course, it's the best if the organization at the end buy the product, but there's also huge potential at using public organization as a test bed. I know from talking with companies in Silicon Valley, they said, oh, you have a very, very excellent healthcare system. I will be delighted because our system is not very good. It's private owned, it's complicated, we can't really address, it's difficult to get test beds. So if you have test beds on whatever, we are interested in moving to you, and we are interested in working with you. So that's very interesting.
Yes, we have a question at the first row. Thank you. Yes.
It's working? Yes. Aldo Tagliabue from the Lombardi Foundation for Biomedical Research. I think it's very important to go from the national cluster to European networks, but we don't have to forget that we are in a global situation. For instance, in our field, if you think genome sequencing and collecting big data, now the Chinese are out of everybody with the Genomic Beijing Institute with 4,000 bioinformatics and cutting-edge instruments. So how do you position this problem of small, medium enterprises in the context of the roadmap of Europe and all these initiatives? Is there a connection already planned or still there is no? Because I think the small, medium enterprise will take a lot of advantage in being connected with this kind of initiatives.
And also, Mrs. Poulsen can join us in the conversation. Thank you. Thank you for
okay. Yes,
being with us.
I think that was a question directed at the Commission, at me. There's a lot of talk of clusters. I come from the unit which is responsible for clusters and emerging industries, and we have quite a number of activities also to look at how can clusters support small companies in accessing global value chains. We actually have set up pilot projects in 2011 called European Strategic Cluster Partnerships, where we invite clusters from related industries, not necessarily from the same sector, but from related industries, to come together at European level to develop joint internationalization strategies, where they can strategically target third markets, they can test those markets together, they can see what can companies from one cluster bring, what can companies from another cluster bring, so that you don't go it alone with just one idea, but you go to bigger markets with solutions. So it's really about creating critical mass. What one company cannot do, a group of companies can do. Sometimes the national angle is not sufficient for markets like China or the US. You need to have many different angles on the issues. And we have seen that these European strategic cluster partnerships are very effective in bringing SMEs into international markets that they would never have dreamt of before this offer came along. And we are continuing to support the formation of European strategic cluster partnerships under the COSME program. And there will, in the very near future, be an open call for proposals where clusters can come together and receive support to set up, you could say, a joint European strategy to attack foreign markets, and in a second phase, also to get support to go into those markets together.
Also, you want to elaborate more on the question?
Yeah, I think also a thing that we haven't really mentioned maybe is that as mentioned by the Commission, that the SME really also need the cooperation within cluster with the big companies, because in many times these big companies are the companies that are sort of ocean going, and the small companies are speedboat that can't really always be ocean going to China and so on. So I think that clusters are, and also as mentioned, cross cluster, that you can use a huge company for another cluster and to connect with a small company in another cluster, and that makes it easier to address the question that comes from China. So I think that cluster and emerging industries is also very important to mention, that the big company need a small because they are faster, more innovative often, and the small one needs the big one because they have the capacity, they are strong on international cooperation.
Thank you. We have another contribution, please.
Yeah, let me also join these two or three things that was mentioned already, which I think it was not addressed. One is this division, let's call it like this, or opposition between emerging sectors and traditional sectors. I don't see it, because I hear it on a regular basis. Not I always support emerging sectors or traditional sectors. I don't see it like this. If you only remember that most of the main customers of emerging sectors are traditional sectors. What you should think about is how can they join together and work together to build what we're talking about, these value chains. If you remember that nanotechnologies applies in metalworking, or new materials applies in textile, or these kind of combinations, what we have to do in Europe is looking at these combinations and see how we can merge and join these sectors in these larger value chains to gain all. Of course, if you have all these things, if you can build one of these value chains in your region, great. But in many cases, as it was said, it's not possible. So you find several customers of your emerging sector in your region, in other regions. So if you can work together to build these value chains, I think it's a competitive advantage for all of us. Now, the second thing is about this technology transfer, sharing knowledge, and things like this. This is a very important function. I mentioned, this cross-fertilization, but I would like to call your attention to the most effective mechanism of making technology transfer. And this is not patents nor contracts, it's transferring people. And we see, for example, on a regular basis at structural funds, that we have programs to do research, support research projects, funded by some funding programs. And then you have funding to support education and training funded by other programs. And they don't talk each other. And so, for example, what we should do, and some regions are already doing it, is why don't we train people while we are doing research projects between research organizations and industry, in a sense that when the project ends, of course, if this is a success, those researchers coming from research organizations have some incentives to be transferred to the companies, because this is not only the best way to transfer the knowledge, but it's also a way of creating innovation management capabilities in the companies, mainly in SMEs, and they are entering points for future projects. So again, if we think not in the small things that we usually think, and in a very, let's say, box way, and in dividing by DGs, or dividing by ministries, or dividing by funding programs, but we think how things work in life, of course it's much easier said than done, but we can make real changes in terms of effectiveness and efficiency of these systems. Sorry to take a bit more time.
What an interesting point. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. Thank you all. What interesting questions. Would you like to also elaborate more on that?
It was really good question. And I think So think of that in many cases also that regions, as Scania, for example, we invest quite a lot in cluster initiatives and cluster organizations. And I think we are on our way to, when we will hopefully use structural funds to get the long-term support for this cluster, we will give them more focused targets, and we will sort of force them to do what you are looking for, I think. So that in many cases, cluster initiatives and clusters, they are doing what the members want them to do just. And in many cases, it's a company in a short time, but if we can use our money as a public organization, even the EU money, to really to force them to do this kind of new things that you are addressing, I think that we could use cluster initiative as a tool for this. And the first question, I think that I fully agree with you that this about the traditional industry and new industry. There are a lot of good examples in every region. We have, I earlier mentioned this Packbridge, this very old industry that have a need to move up in the value chain, have to understand how to get in contact with customer. So we had arranged a workshop, 50 companies from packaging sector, 50 young entrepreneurs from the media sector, just brought in some coffee, and they were business because they found solution how to communicate mobile and packaging solutions. So there's a lot of things to do, and the most important thing is, as you said, I think to develop, support the traditional industry. If you should use that word in that case. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have time for a last question, please, over there? Yes, maybe the last one. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Paulo Ferreira dos Santos. I run a startup in Portugal. On the vein of the last question, this is a very important step to understand why companies innovate. Companies innovate because they need to distinguish themselves from the other competitors, and they need to survive, basically. So, to promote innovation, one of the things is not protecting, because in some ways, sometimes we are protecting companies that has no capabilities of innovating, and they are occupying the room for others that could come more innovative, that could replace them. I listen here also. An important part is comparing Silicon Valley with what is done in Europe. First, you cannot find other university in the world with the attitude of Stanford that puts on the top of their priorities technology transfer and doing everything. So they find the investor, they find the entrepreneur, they find and put and work together to build the company. So this is I don't know any European university that is doing this. The second step to innovate is exactly that. So if I want to innovate, I need to be able to innovate. And one of the things that people don't understand in Europe is looking that an American startup on average has 30% of their staff with a PhD. In Europe is maybe 0.00 whatever. So if you don't have the knowledge inside to generate people inside that is able first to absorb knowledge, to generate new knowledge, there is nothing that can work. And for me, for example, in my company, I have only one PhD student in 24 people. I cannot compete with the European Union projects to hire PhDs because they are much better paid there, a much comfortable position, and if we don't provoke some kind of discomfort, they will never move for the economy and for the industry to deliver this, what they can do to generate value. And more money you put to create comfort for them, less they go to the companies, and less innovative will be the company. So to innovate, it is necessary that those guys, the best brains, are inside of companies and not in thinking only in basic research. Basic research is important, but it's also important applied research and transforming this research in products. I don't know how a setup of regions can address this, but I think if we could address, we could maybe thinking that we could compete with the Americans.
Thank you for your contribution. We really need the best brains. I don't know if anybody of you want to elaborate more on that, or maybe we can just take your considerations and work on that. What I would say to, for example, to Mr. De Crinito is to transfer also to the policymakers of Lombardy that maybe all this great amount of money should not only go to startups but also to traditional companies in order to foster innovation inside them, and to maybe we can also create some programs, more programs to exchange people from one organization to another, from public sector to private sector, from universities to companies, and that really could help emerging industries to be more innovative. Also innovating on a social basis, not only innovations for products, but also we have to innovate our society also. So I just wish you well, and thank you for joining us. And we go on with the next panelist. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for creating, for your very interesting questions.